Welcome into the Saints Insider Podcast for Wednesday, September the 4th. I'm Zach Ewing with Rod Walker, Matthew Paras, and Jeff Duncan, three of our ace reporters on the Saints beat here at the Times-Picayune and NOLA.com. We appreciate you joining us. We're missing Luke Johnson today, but we do have some of his NFL picks. We're going to do our NFL picks and predictions today. We also have a little bit of Saints talk at the beginning, some best and worst case scenarios, the Saints named captains, some cool stuff for you today, and then we will get into our NFL picks. Want to let you know that Saints Insider is sponsored by Bank Plus. Their banking decisions are actually made here in New Orleans by local bankers who know the community and take the time to know you. From small business to big business, home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. Learn more at bankplus.net. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back. We got some Saints best case, worst case scenarios. Jeff, you pulled 30 media members covering the Saints, and we're going to talk about their predictions and what the true best case, worst case is for the Saints right after this break.
Fellas, it's clear why Caesars brought us together. This is the ultimate quarterback roundtable.
I think I know why we're here.
What? Quarterback, high school, Oklahoma?
I thought that was a musical.
Garth, I think you're here because when people use Caesars Sportsbook, they earn with Caesars rewards. Things like celebrity chef dining, Vegas vacations, even tickets to your show.
This app is over the top. There's the idea.
Bet with Caesars Sportsbook. Earn Caesars rewards and see your favorite quarterback Garth Brooks in concert.
Hey, you can't throw like that. Ooh, I see at least 3 of them in there.
3 what?
Possums, big rats, I don't know.
Clarify big.
You're gonna have to gut it.
How much is that gonna cost? Maybe I should just move.
Maybe.
Is that your van?
Hi, strawberry mango. Here you go. Thank you. I'll take another one.
All right, Saints Insider Podcast talking season predictions for the Saints. We're here. We're game week, guys, finally. Jeff, as I said before the break, you pulled 30 media members who cover the Saints from print to digital, TV, radio, everything in between. And there were no outliers. That's what stuck out to me about it. Like, usually one year you get some guys 5-12, or somebody thinks they're going to be 12-5, or literally all 30 people were between 7-10 and 10-7.
Yeah, I think it kind of speaks to where the national, I think, forecast is for this team as well. I think people have gotten a little burned in the past by being overly optimistic. I mean, I remember 2 years ago, I think everybody but one picked a winning season. Last year was certainly more divided, and I think this year everyone's like, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice. Shame. I think there's a little scar tissue from being optimistic, seeing this team in camp. I try to remind people this is the time of year when everybody gets excited, but the Saints looked good last year in preseason and camp. I mean, Derek Carr in particular looked really good, and things change once the season opens. So I think people are a little more guarded and very much in prove-it mode with this team. They've lost the benefit of the doubt. We've heard the front office. We've heard Dennis Allen sell for years, and I think now everyone's like, okay, well, we're going to sit here on the side until you prove it. And I would actually think those predictions were kind of what I expected, to be honest with you.
Rod, you were the positive outlier the last couple of years, but not this year.
Yeah, you're not getting me again with that, but I just think, and again, I know we keep talking about this offensive line. I don't know if this team did anything to make you believe that they're going to be better this year. Like, I mean, they got Chase Young, they got a new coordinator, but you look at those line issues, and the schedule's a little tougher. I mean, I just don't see any reason to believe that this team will be better than they were last year. I mean, maybe some things will fall into place, and they will be, but I just didn't see enough to do that. So I went with 8 and 9, and I actually contemplated 7 and 10, but I did go a little positive. I guess I went 8 and 9.
Yeah, Duncan and I think we're 7 and 10. Matt, you were 9 and 8, right?
I was, but it hits to Rod's point that this is essentially more or less the same team. There is a new offensive system. I think that's gonna be a bit of a work in progress. I think it's gonna struggle. For me, what it came down to is we've all talked about their schedule to begin the year. I think it's going to create a hole again, and they're going to have to climb out of that hole. And I think they can, but same thing has happened last year where they climbed out of the hole too late. And so what does that mean for their playoff chances? I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. but I just think they're going to finish above 500.
Well, and that if they do start 2-4, 2-5, something like that, like the question then becomes, can Dennis Allen keep the locker room together in order to rally late in the season? But let's talk best case scenario. If everything gels, Derek Carr is who he was the last 5 weeks of the season and not the first 10 last year. The offensive line holds it together. The defense returns to be top 10. What is the ceiling for this team? What's the best case scenario for the Saints, Jeff?
Well, look, I think this team has the talent, especially in some of the key spots. There's some elite players still on this team. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, Taysom Hill, Demario Davis, Chase Young, if he's healthy and motivated like he looks in camp. Derek Carr is one of the better quarterbacks, I think, in the division for sure. In the NFC. So I think this team could easily win 10 games. And in the NFC South, that might be good enough. It's not a very competitive, division. I don't see any kingpins, and I know everybody's kind of crowning the Falcons, but I think 10 wins will get it done in the NFC South. And I think, like Matt said, the start is going to be critical. If they can somehow win one of these 4 games after the Carolina game, I've got them chalked up to win this opener. God forbid they don't. It's going to be crazy if they don't. But if they can win one of those next 4 and come out of that 2-3, I think they've got a great shot to kind of keep it together. And there's enough leadership on the team to keep the ship, steered in the right direction.
Yeah, the best case scenario is if they do play to their potential and they are able to get the most out of these guys who are aging. I think that shows that they just would seize the division, right? Like, I don't think their best case scenario would have them be a top tier contender in the NFC, but it should be good enough to win the NFC South, especially if they're able to smack the Falcons around, to dominate the Buccaneers. Like, you can still clearly win the NFC South if everything goes right.
Yeah, and if you do that, I mean, look at the Bucs last year. They were not world beaters, but they won the NFC South. They caught a good playoff matchup, beat Philadelphia, and then they were in that game in Detroit. Rod, I mean, I guess if you could squint hard enough, you could see the Bucs winning that game and getting into the NFC Championship game. I mean, look, strange things happen once you get into the playoffs.
Yeah, and just kind of going back to the beginning of the season, I think if this team can somehow start off 2-0, I think if they start like getting some momentum, I think they have a chance to hit that 10-win ceiling that we talked about, and maybe even push it up to 11. But let's
turn it up to 11.
Yeah, let's turn it up to 11. Bold predictions. But yeah, I mean, if they can get if they're good enough to get in the playoffs, I mean, that means they've fixed some of the issues that we thought were going to be issues, and if they can get in the playoffs, I mean, I think they have a chance to do really well.
And the balance of power in the league is mostly in the AFC. I mean, I know the Niners are the team everyone's pointing to, but you get in the playoffs, you never know what happens. It happens all the time where a team gets upset and all of a sudden your path is cleared. Are we saying Saints hometown Super Bowl? Is that what we're saying?
That's the ceiling,
Only if
man.
they start 3-2, like Rod said that one pod.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen.
Hey, another amen. Amen again.
But yeah, the AFC is certainly deeper. We'll get to that in our NFL predictions coming up. But let's flip it. Worst case. I'm going to make an argument, guys, that the worst case, things could actually be worse than if they go 4-13 and get a top 5 pick next year. Because then, if that happens, if the bottom falls out, that allows you to hit the reset button. Everybody understands you're hitting the reset button. We'll see to what extent they hit the reset button. But maybe the worst case is you go 7-10, 8-9, even 9-8 again, but miss the playoffs, and you're kind of just stuck in this horrible middle again.
Yeah, here's the worst case for the Saints. It is week 8 after a 45-17 loss to the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton. Dennis Allen is just hanging around. They're not going to fire him because that's not what the Saints do, and no one shows. Is it at home against the Chargers? Do I have that right?
It's a road game.
No, it is a road game. So whatever their next home game is after that.
I think it's Atlanta.
Yeah.
I think it's Atlanta.
So it's just everyone from Atlanta comes and invades the Dome, I guess. That'd be a real low for this franchise. And there was a stat floating around Twitter that it was like $45 was the average get-in price right now for Saints tickets. It was last in the league. That number, if they lose that Broncos game and they're at the bottom, that might be like $20 or something. I don't.
That number would be lower than 20.
Well, we're
lose.
talking about average. I mean, that includes the good
yes.
seats and the bad seats. You could. What was that Carolina game last year? You could have gotten in for $3 or something.
I saw him for 11 the other day.
No, and look, I think the worst case scenario is another 500 season. You know, I just think there's something to be said for bottoming out in the NFL. They kind of reward the way the league's set up. You get rewarded for being bad. And the Saints, my spoiler alert on my column for the season preview coming up, but like if you take out the years that Breeze and Peyton were here since 2000, I think it is, they finished like 8-8 and 7-9 every year. I mean, they're the masters of mediocrity, and that's not where you want to be in the NFL. You either want to be good or you want to be pretty bad, because you're never going to get a Caleb Williams to turn the franchise around by being 7-9 or 8-8.
Look at the Houston
I think
Texans.
the division they're in, I think it kind of sets you up almost to be 500 all the time, because you're probably going to go at least 3-3 in the division, and you get some bottom teams.
I mean,
some other,
I don't think it's necessarily the worst thing if they go 500 again, just because you can still change directions with that. You know, you can still say, all right, all we're doing is not good enough. They can fire Dennis Allen. They can look at other quarterback options. Like, you can still make monumental changes if things are mostly the same. They're concerned about, I think, is the fan interest and, is there actual excitement for this franchise? And if you bottom out, that happens. If you stay in the middle of the pack, that happens. Like, this is it's not a dire situation, but it has potential to be.
Well, I think the problem with the 7-9, 8-8 is that the front office has a tendency of being lulled into thinking they're
We're
close.
almost there, sure.
So they don't make those monumental changes, and they've done that in the past.
That's a good point.
I mean, our good buddy Fletcher Mackel always says this about Katrina. It took something as catastrophic as Hurricane Katrina to kind of blow up the New Orleans education system and start from scratch again. You almost needed something that devastating to blow it up, because it was so dysfunctional. And I feel like we almost need that for the Saints sometimes.
Yeah,
These 7 and 9 years just aren't cutting it.
And as Rod mentioned, like, the schedule's just set up to where what is the lowest record you could conceivably see the Saints having? I mean, is it 5-12? I
think the wheels could fall off.
I mean,
easy.
but they have they play the Giants, the Broncos, the Commanders. I mean, if you look at power rankings and stuff, these are supposed to be some of the worst teams in the NFL.
I know,
the
but
Panthers twice.
that doesn't play out every year. I mean,
No, it doesn't. But I mean, conceivably, could they be 3-14 and have the number 1 pick next year?
Oh yeah, I think definitely. I mean, if Derek Carr were to get hurt,
sure,
something like that. I mean, stuff happens. The wheels come off. It happens.
Well, one thing about the worst case scenario that I think is part of that and could be part of Derek Carr getting hurt is the offensive line. And here we are, 4 days before the season starts, and it still kind of feels like I think most people don't think the Saints did enough to supplement this offensive line that was such an issue last year, Rod. And we have the starters listed on the screen here for Sunday's game. Do you feel that way? I mean, did they do enough?
No, I don't think they did enough. And a lot of what we were counting on was, we keep hearing Trevor Penning's development, and I don't know if we've seen enough of it to think that he's developed enough to protect Carr. And I think that can be an issue for this team, and I think it's not going to take long to find that out when you look at some of the pass rushers that this team's going to face these first few weeks of the season, straight out of the gate with Clowney, Michael Parsons. I mean, it's just a tough list of guys he's going to have to face, and if he holds up, they'll be fine. But if not, it could be a long season.
Yeah, and I guess the caveat is, can the offensive scheme hide some of those deficiencies? That's the hope.
Maybe. I mean, with Penning, I've been on this train for months. I think he's going to get benched in the first month of the season. I just think they're going to have to be forced to make a move there just because of his own play not living up to their standards and his standards. And Trevor Penning is already kind of a backup for them, in the sense that you think about Ryan Ramczyk, they were hopeful at first that he would maybe be able to recover from that knee injury. But it was also clear for months that wasn't going to be the case. So by the time the draft rolls around, by the time free agency rolls around, they had a good idea that Ryan Ramczyk wasn't going to be able to play this season. So did they do enough? I don't know, but this is the thing about what you were talking about with the front office maybe potentially fooling themselves into believing. I mean, Trevor Penning's a first-round pick. They want to see the return on investment. They say, hey, maybe a new position's all that he needs. We have this new offensive scheme, and here we are a week before the season talking about whether Trevor Penning can be a legitimate right tackle starter.
I've had a lot of people, I'm sure you all have too, bring that point up above everything else this offseason. Is if you knew James Hurst was retiring, which I think they had at least an inkling that he was going to retire. At least Derek Carr told me that on the golf course. When they announced it, I remember it was at the Pro-Am for the Zurich Classic, and I went up and talked to him about it. And he said, yeah, he told me that he was thinking about this. So if he knew, the front office had to know. So you knew that your main stopgap might not be available, and you had to know Ryan Ramczyk. They've been talking about Ryan Ramczyk for 2 years.
We knew the last couple weeks of last season that it was going to be an issue.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, that is the one thing I would say you could question is, okay, if they didn't get a veteran, just a veteran fill-in guy, which you could have addressed that, then what are you doing with that pick of Bub Means, or what are you doing with Kool-Aid McKinstry? Could you have taken a tackle somewhere? Maybe you trade up and get one in the third or fourth round. Something. They did nothing.
They added Lucas Patrick, who's going to start. They added Ali Udo. They added Shane Lemieux. But a lot of these guys are like, Shane Lemieux didn't even make the team.
Right.
They added just depth, and it doesn't feel like it was enough.
Well, they were trying to reset their books a little bit, I think, as part of that explanation, get them to a healthier cap standpoint from where they had been the last few years. So I actually think that was a wise move. It's just, I talked to people before the drafts asking, like, hey, should the Saints double up on tackles? Is that rare for an NFL team to do? Is it wise? And they said it is rare because, normally teams don't invest more than one pick at the same position. But in this case, they felt like it was warranted just because the Saints' offensive line depth was so,
didn't Seattle do it just a year ago or two rookie tackles that started for them?
It may be rare, but it's rare for a team to have an offensive line in this bad shape too. Yeah. So maybe that's what was called for.
Look, they clearly thought Trevor Penning was the answer.
Yeah.
And it's just looking more and more like that's not going to be the case. And man, that's an oversight. They have to live with that. But I do think this scheme, I think everyone in that facility knows what they've got in Trevor Penning, and so they're going to have to do some things to cover it up as best they can.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see starting Sunday. Saints Insider Podcast will be back on Friday. We'll have a full preview of Saints Panthers every which way. Subscribe to the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel. Sign up for alerts, and you get notifications whenever we do have a new podcast. Want to move on to our transaction segment. Transaction segment is proudly sponsored by Associated Grocers. Join our team and help support the success of local independent grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. No real transactions first week of the season. Basically, all that's done. But what I went with here is that the Saints named captains, and they named their normal 7 captains. You guys are going to have to help me. It's Derek Carr, Eric McCoy, Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu, J.T. Gray,
Zach Wood,
Cam Jordan,
and Cam Jordan. And then they added
Taysom,
a favorite of Saints Insider, Taysom Hill is a team captain this year. So that's pretty cool.
Didn't surprise me. I don't know about y'all. I thought
we kind of if we were voting, those are the guys we would have picked too. I mean, I know 8 is
too many.
Kind of too many.
It's too like Zach Wood is a very nice human being. Why is Zach Wood a captain?
Well, I mean, but I think the way they do it is they vote.
Yes, sure.
And so it's whoever gets the votes.
Yeah,
and then they get
fine.
Close. Like, I'm sure like if Taysom Hill was close.
But you can vote and say, we're going to take the top 5 vote getters instead of the top 8 vote getters.
Yes. Right. But I mean, most teams have, 6, I think.
I mean, two special teams guys is kind of a lot.
I know teams do it, but you don't need team captains to know who the leaders in that locker room are. Like that, right. The hierarchy sorts itself. It's the defensive guys. It's Eric McCoy. It's Derek Carr. Like those are the guys that respected. And Taysom Hill,
it's
too.
a sign of respect for Taysom Hill. So.
Yeah, I think it's honoring him for being such a good teammate.
Sure.
Like if you're around Taysom, I don't think he's the most rah-rah guy. Like he's not one of those guys that's he's kind of to himself. He does his thing, but I think he has a lot of respect from teammates. Yeah. And I'm sure he leads in his own way, but he's not the guy that's gathering the running backs or tight ends on the sideline. Right. That's just not who he is.
But you watch him in the weight room, I think you have to say, "Oh, this is a captain."
You watch him in the weight room and you
if you-
feel inspired.
See
Yeah.
that squat?
Go read
Luke
Luke's story.
Johnson's story.
Yeah, go read Luke's story. Saints Fans Associated Grocers is hiring. If you're looking to join a team dedicated to supporting independent grocers, apply today. Your future starts here. Another one of the Saints captains, obviously, is Derek Carr. And speaking of great feature stories, Matt, you wrote one that's on NOLA.com
Excellent.
/Saints.
thank you.
Interesting angle you took here. You went back and talked to Jake Plummer, who had to replace, not immediately replace, but kind of like Carr and Drew Brees, he had to replace John Elway in Denver. You also talked to Drew Bledsoe, who had to replace Jim Kelly in Buffalo. So talk to those guys about what it's kind of like to be the next permanent guy after the guy. And go into a locker room that has a mural of Drew Brees painted in it, and go into a stadium where still there are more number 9 jerseys than any other jersey, and perform and live up to those expectations.
Yeah, like Jake Plummer was saying that it's not so much that you feel the pressure about it, it's just that there are constant reminders. So yeah, when you walk into the Denver Broncos lobby and you see 2 Super Bowl trophies that John Elway did, and then you look up and there's a giant mural of John Elway hoisting the Super Bowl trophy. There's just kind of constant reminders, and I feel like that's with Derek Carr here. But I think Drew Bledsoe brought up a really fascinating point, is because in Buffalo, he was saying Buffalo as a city is they're not a fan base that eats their own, and that in New Orleans it seems like maybe that is the case. But also, he didn't necessarily have to live up to the mythology of Jim Kelly, but Derek Carr, he said Derek Carr could be close to perfect, but it's still not going to live up to the mythology of Drew Brees. And, we can debate whether like the fan base disliking Derek Carr has to do directly with Drew Brees. I think it's a large part of it, just because of what he's like, the standard he set. They're so used to winning and all that. I mean, that I've had players tell me that, and Dennis Allen agreed with the premise too. So I do think it's part of that. He set such a high standard that it's really tough to live up to.
Yeah, and I don't think the fans. I know the fans were not fair to Derek Carr at all times last year. Now, some of it he brought on himself. He yelled at Chris Olave, he yelled at Eric McCoy. We'll leave Michael Thomas out of it because Michael Thomas seems to fight with everybody. But like, he brought, and then he didn't play very well for a stretch too, Rod. I mean, he brought some of it on himself. This year kind of feels like he wants it to be a reset year. The question is, can it be a reset year?
I think it can be if Clint Kubiak's offense works and if they're able to protect them like they want to do. I think Carr has done a lot of things, and Matt mentioned some of them in his story, but he's done a lot of things to, I think, show his teammates that he's kind of there for them. And I think the bad body language last year that we saw in so many games, I think hopefully we won't see that again, because that did bring a lot of it on. But, I mean, it's as simple as completing passes and winning games. It'll cure all of it.
Yeah.
And it'll make it go away.
Yeah.
This is how under the radar Derek Carr is. We still have Taysom Hill's picture up on this slide. I forgot to change it, so my bad on that. But Matt, go ahead.
I was reading, fan reaction to the story, just glancing social media replies, and God, the overwhelming responses though to like the headline, which was "Can Derek Carr win over fans?" People were adamant no. That like the ship has sailed on like them warming up, and maybe that's just fans being fans.
If they're 4-2 and they're beating up on Denver, people will buy in.
It's just such a it's a really weird dynamic, or it's a different dynamic personally than what I've been used to. I've only been covering this team for a year, but in Washington, there you go. They cycled through so many QBs, and those fans and some of those QBs weren't as popular, but still, it feels like anything Derek Carr says is just like instantly like screw you,
Yeah, and I don't know if it's all the fans. I just think social media tends to kind of, give voice to what I call the vocal minority. It's kind of, the trolls on social media tend to be what in the old days when you had sports talk radio, you had the lunatic fringe that always called in, right? Most people are just listening. The lunatic fringe calls in, right? Yeah. So, like Paul Feinbaum got a big job at ESPN around those kind of people, right? I feel like we tend to see that, when we watched him signing autographs at Ullman. There were a lot of people that were engaging with him that I'm sure aren't sitting there on Twitter trolling away.
There were, but I mean, if you think about the Lions game in specific, like them booing every time he came on the field. Now they were really down in that game. I guess I get the circumstances, but he was also booed for a stretch, like for a play in that Tulane practice. Like this didn't make the story, but he overthrew Chris Olave in the end zone. There were some boos. Someone jokingly called him like a used car salesman. Like there's
passion, man.
It's a passionate fan base, and I do think like I don't think social media is completely off base here in the terms of how many people like dislike Derek Carr. Maybe I mean, again, it's social media, but like if your local grocery store or supermarket's like kind of piling on the way that Brewmart did last year, and you saw it in the Mardi Gras parade too. Like it. I just don't think it was a social media thing.
No,
I just think winning can.
Yeah, I mean,
I do agree with that, but I just think winning.
Archie told me he got booed.
Yeah.
Archie Manning's beloved now, so there's kind of that. Every quarterback, I remember doing the story last year. Like almost every quarterback, except Drew, because he had spectacular success right away, and surprising, he got this long leash. But for the most part, I mean, Bobby Hebert told me he got booed, so it kind of happens. It comes with the territory. But I do think your point is the analogy you drew in your story, I thought was spot on, of like, if you love New Orleans, it'll love you back. I mean, it hasn't really ever given Derek Carr. I mean, they did it first, but he's got a
very short leash.
Very short leash.
Yeah. Well, as Rod said, winning probably will cure everything in that case. And speaking of winning, we're going to pick our Super Bowl winners and other NFL predictions. First, we owe you another 30-second break. We'll be back right after this. All right, NFL prediction time on the Saints Insider podcast. We asked each of you guys, including Luke Johnson, who's not here, to name a storyline you were following in the NFL this year that didn't have anything to do with the Saints, kind of an overarching thing. Matt, what'd you come up with?
I kind of, not to be hipstery all of a sudden, but I went with Cleveland. And is Deshaun Watson just going to be the worst quarterback in the league now? Like, I get that he is very unpopular. Maybe rightfully so. I'll leave that stuff alone. But, Joe Flacco did such a nice job for them last year after he got hurt. But they fired the offensive coordinator. Kevin Stefanski, I think, is a hell of a coach, 2-time Coach of the Year award winner. But what is Deshaun Watson going to do? Is this is a very good roster. And yet, God, he's been terrible. Like, are we going to see Jameis this season? I just think Cleveland has a very good roster, but I think Deshaun Watson's going to sink them.
And that contract didn't help, right?
Oh yeah,
raised expectations, and it makes me think also about how the Saints went all in for Deshaun Watson, to try and get him. Lord knows that worked out.
Well, speaking of quarterbacks, you went with the rookies, or was that Rod? That was Rod. I'm sorry, Rod went with the rookie quarterbacks.
I was going to say we went the same thing. Yeah, I'm just kind of really curious about Caleb Williams. He's kind of raised the expectations in Chicago. I'm looking forward to seeing what Jaden Daniels does in Washington, and obviously Bo Nix in Denver. So for me, it's just these rookie quarterbacks in this class and
Spencer Rattler.
How well they do. Just kidding. Spencer Rattler, Week 5 starter.
Yeah, don't. It's for the second straight year. Really, like last year, you look at Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud and how much that shaped the season.
Right.
Whether these guys can hit the ground running can really shape the playoff race. Jeff, what'd you have?
I think I would pick the Jets, didn't I?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, I'm just kind of intrigued by that whole dynamic up there with Aaron Rodgers, who's trying to play out his Hall of Fame career. And
Hassan Reddick still hasn't reported, right?
Yeah,
you get that.
They're a fascinating team. That opener against the Niners with Rodgers going back to the Bay Area, I think that's going to be a fascinating game to watch. I don't know we talked about the Saints having a wide cone of uncertainty. I think the Jets are the same way. They think they could be really good, or the wheels could fall off them.
Yeah, that feels like a team. Man, you could see them winning the Super Bowl or going like 6-11, like anything in between. So, okay, those are kind of our storylines. Oh, Luke mentioned another team. He mentioned the 49ers, and they kind of pulled it all together this week. The team that plays the Jets on Monday night. Trent Williams signed. Brandon Ayuk signed. And, it looks like they could be really good. Of course, Brock Purdy is the guy who was Mr. Irrelevant in the draft, just going to be like an all-pro his whole career. Is that a thing? And so we'll see what the 49ers do. I think that their window of contention is probably right now. And if they waste another year, Brock Purdy's going to need to be paid. We already saw the holdouts they had this year. Christian McCaffrey's not getting any younger. Fred Warner's going to need to be paid. Like it could fall apart on him. So this year's big. And then mine, just because none of you guys mentioned it, I think it's a little weird that it's going under the radar, but Kansas City Chiefs could three-peat. And it doesn't seem like anybody's really talking about it all that much.
Well, I was going to save that for later, so.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, we will have picks and see if anybody picks it, but the last really realistic chance at this, I guess, would have been the Cowboys in the mid-'90s. I know the Patriots won 2 in a row. I don't even think they made the playoffs the year after that. Or if they did, they got knocked out pretty early. But the Cowboys had a chance at it. The 49ers had a chance at it a few years before that. But that's one I'll be watching. So we're going to move on now and talk. We each pick a surprise team. Not necessarily a team that wins the Super Bowl, but a team we think could be a lot better than the experts think. And I don't know, Matt, this team is kind of getting a lot of love, but you went with a team in the NFC that maybe takes that leap.
Technically close to home. I changed mine because I had Seattle originally, but I was thinking about it more. Man, Caleb Williams is walking into a great situation in Chicago. This isn't even about Hard Knocks and like all the hype that can generate there. I didn't watch Hard Knocks. I think Chicago is stacked from receiver, really good receiver, respectable line, a really solid defense, the way that they turn things around there. And they've just quietly, after bottoming out for the last 2 seasons, basically, has just done a really nice job of setting up the situation for Caleb Williams to come in right away. And can he do it? I think so. I think the guy's really good. And he was the number 1 pick for a reason. So I really like Chicago to make that leap, and I think they're going to be a playoff team.
Yeah, I was impressed with them when they came into the Dome last year defensively. So, I mean, plug in at quarterback with those receivers. There's a lot of reasons to believe in them.
They got some pieces for sure. Jeff, you kind of cheated and had 2, but go ahead.
Why is that?
Well, I said surprise team. There was no S on it.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I did do 2.
You had 2. Go ahead.
I did too. Well, I mean, look, I would thought I was being crafty about picking the Arizona Cardinals because I think expectations are low there. But I just saw the Athletics story today where they polled all the front office personnel, GMs, personnel people, asked them their surprise, and they were number 1 on the list. So it made me feel good for my pick, though. I think they're a well-coached team that's flying under the radar. I think that division's going to be a little down compared to what it's been. I may be wrong on that, but I like it. And the fact that John Gannon played at Louisville is another boost for their credentials. And then, of course, I'm going to pick my boy Sean Payton, Denver. Although too many people, you're the king of the betting public and how
Pay
that
the public.
never pays that way, right? Yeah. And I was talking to Patrick Smith, their PR guy, and he told me when I was doing all those Peyton stories recently, he said that someone told him that 93% of the betting public is on the Broncos over. That's never a good sign.
No.
93% of the money.
I think they're going to be terrible. I really
so there
do.
you go.
I think maybe in a year or 2 they could be pretty good. I don't see it.
Yeah.
They gave Pat Surtain a bunch
He's
of money
very
this morning,
high on
too.
the team, but he tends to fall in love like a lot of coaches. The talent, if you talk to people around the league, I think they have one of the 3 or 4 least talented rosters, but I don't think the outside world is as confident about this young rookie. He's comparing this rookie class to their 06 class. He thinks they're going to have a lot of contributors out of that. So
Right.
we'll
Well,
see.
it would be a bad sign if the coach wasn't optimistic, put it that way. But Sean Payton optimistic about the Broncos. Rod, your pick's not going to be very popular. Your surprise pick.
I picked the Atlanta Falcons. I just think this is a team that, they were in the playoff hunt up until the last week or 2 of the season with a quarterback who they've got rid of. The Cardinals just got rid of Desmond Ridder as well. He wasn't very good. And I just think Kirk Cousins just changes all of that. This is obviously a quarterback-driven league, and I think when you add Kirk Cousins and you add people like Justin Simmons that they add on defense, I think they have a chance to to be really good and take a step. I just think they're moving in the right direction. And I think Terry Fontenot, who was obviously here, I think he's done a great job in building that roster. So
we look at like Super Bowl matchups at the Superdome.
That would be the worst one you could get.
You know, the Saints, had it not been for the no call, would have played in Atlanta in a Super Bowl. I tell you, the one thing Saints fans don't want is for the reverse to come true this year. So
I think they're a sleeper Super Bowl team.
They got a chance. Luke's pick was the Tennessee Titans, which I like. I think I think Brian Callahan's offense is going to do wonders for the Titans. They're in kind of a tough division now, though. All of a sudden, the AFC South is pretty tough. And then mine was the Seahawks. I kind of, when you drop the Seahawks, I think Mike McDonald could be like Coach of the Year material. I love his defense. Think they could really surprise. I think the 49ers and Rams both potentially take a step back, which could open the door for Seattle. And then I will add this too. My soon-to-be 9-year-old son Jacob, I asked him this question the other day, and I thought he came up with an intriguing answer. He said the Browns. He said the Cleveland Browns will be the surprise team, and you can see it. Like their run game is good. If Deshaun Watson gives them anything, their run game and defense is already in place. Like that team could be really good too.
Yeah, just what does his arm have left? I mean,
well, and maybe that's where famous Jameis steps in, man.
And all this comes down to what are expectations? Like, I think people think the Browns are going to be pretty good. They were pretty good last year.
Right.
That's true.
Didn't they get in the playoffs?
Yeah,
last year?
they did. They got routed by the Texans.
Yeah, they looked awful.
They were favored to win that game, and then disappointed. So, speaking of disappointments, moving on to our disappointing teams. You had the Steelers, Matt? Is that right?
I did, yeah.
That's a good one.
Rod's Pittsburgh Steelers.
They brought in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. It feels like they are starting Wilson just so they can bench him and get to Fields at some point this season. I just don't think it's going to work. I know Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season, but I kind of think that this is going to be the case this year. And they have a stacked defense, but I don't really like either of those quarterbacks, especially. I just think Russell Wilson is like very well past done at this point, and I just don't think it's going to work out for them.
I almost put the Steelers down too, to be honest.
Wow.
Yeah, I really did. I'm not really big on Russell Wilson either. I just don't know if he's the
I think
answer,
Justin Fields will start sooner or later.
Yeah.
But we'll see how that goes. Rod, who'd you have?
I went with the Jets. They're getting so much hype, and I just don't know if it's. I mean, people got them winning the division, and I just don't see them leaping, past Miami or Buffalo actually. So, I'm gonna say that I think the Jets are gonna be a disappointment.
I think it's funny that you picked the Jets and Rod, Jeff, you picked the Eagles, right?
Yeah,
that's fun. You'll see why that's funny in a minute. But why are you down on the Eagles?
I'm just down on Nick Sirianni. It's more. I mean, they got a talented roster. I just don't know about the coaching. I mean, they fell apart last season. I think he's desperate. I'm not convinced on him. And Jalen Hurts took a step back last year, so I think he's got to step forward. I think of those games we talked about, the Saints, that 4-game gauntlet after the Carolina. I think that's the game they can win.
Jason Kelsey's gone. The bush push, the tush push may be
outlaw.
Yeah. Luke and I both picked the same team. We stayed in the division, but we took the Cowboys as our disappointing team. They didn't do anything in the offseason. The CeeDee Lamb drama. Team can't stop the run. They're going to open with Cleveland. I think Cleveland could run all over them. I'm not high on the Cowboys. And then if I had to add another one, and I don't know that this team will be a super big disappointment. Like they could still be a playoff team. I think the Ravens, who opened the season tomorrow against the Chiefs, I think the Ravens take a step back.
Yep. For what it's worth, the athletic story polling front office people, Cowboys were number one team.
I think if the Saints are going to win one of those next 4 games, that's the one to go straight to Dallas and get to 2-0, and then try to withstand the next 3 weeks.
1-1, right?
Well, I did say they could lose to the Panthers.
Yeah, that's right. We talked about that.
I didn't choose the Panthers as my surprise team just because I don't think. Like, I still think they could be 7-10, but that's still a lot.
That would be a surprise.
Yeah, that's a lot better than people think. I just don't want to. Oh, they're a surprise. They went 7-10.
What's their over/under win total? It's got to be low. 5.5.
Yeah,
that's about as low as it gets.
Yeah, I think they go over. Yeah, Patriots are 4.5. I think is the lowest one. Okay, time for Super Bowl picks. Super Bowl in New Orleans this year. First of all, are we all in agreement the best possible matchup for the city of New Orleans? Sports Illustrated picked Bengals versus Lions. That would be a dream for New Orleans. You got Joe Burrow on one side, you got Dan Campbell on the other.
Oh, yeah.
They would love that.
Well, they want the Saints first.
Well, okay.
Right, that's the best.
You've forgotten about the Saints.
I haven't forgotten about them.
Saints, Bengals would be.
We're being realistic, man. I could have said Commanders, Bengals too, but Jaden Daniels against Joe Burrow. But
Ring the bell, baby.
yeah, there's a lizard walking across the table.
I was very distracted
We
by
got a
that
lizard
earlier.
in the studio.
I like it. He's a mascot. He's our mascot.
Like raining buckets outside. Okay, so if it's not Bengals Lions, I mean, some of us picked that. Like, we're going to start with Luke because he's not here.
I know Luke picked the Bengals.
Luke picked the Bengals to beat the Lions in the Super Bowl. So that is his.
I thought
pick.
he'd have the LSU or something.
I think
Joe
Luke-
Burrow. I mean,
I think Luke
that's
picked the
true.
Bengals
Joe Burrow,
last year
Jamar
too.
Chase.
didn't
I think he did.
Yeah,
I think he had Bengals.
he's
and
like Burrow
Eagles last year, maybe.
Yeah, he's all in.
And I could see that happening. I worry about the Bengals. There's a lot of drama with that team right now. They lost DJ Reader on that defense too. I don't know.
You got a lot of former Saints on the defense. Sheldon Rankins, Trey Hendrickson, Von Bell, all draft picks starting on defense.
Yeah, they're like the Louisiana Bengals. I'm going to give Jacob's pick because I told him I would. He's got the same Super Bowl as the last New Orleans Super Bowl, Ravens versus Niners, but he's got 49ers winning this year.
Does he have the lights going out too? Or?
I don't think he knows about that. He wasn't
Really?
born yet, so I don't think he knows about that, but I'll have to tell him. All right, Rod, who you got?
I agree with your son on one of those teams. I have the Ravens coming back to New Orleans again. I think the addition of Derrick Henry to the offense is going to make them really good. And Ravens and
He took the Eagles.
And the Eagles, yeah. I think same thing. I think Saquon Barkley on the Eagles going to make them really good. I think 49ers are probably going to take a step back after. I just think something's going to happen. I mean, I think they're still loaded on paper, but I just think somewhere along the road they're going to have a hiccup and not make it. So anyway, I got the Ravens and the Eagles. I think I got the Ravens winning it.
You got the Ravens winning.
Ravens winning, yeah.
Yep. All right.
10 years later.
I'm going to tell you the color you're going to see in February in New Orleans is going to be green. And I'm going to tell you why. It's because the Eagles are going to beat the Jets in Super Bowl 59.
Wow.
All right. And the Eagles, you're down on Nick Sirianni. I think Nick Sirianni realized his limitations. He went out and got Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, who are two of the better coordinators he could have gotten. They added Saquon Barkley to that offense. That offense has so many weapons that they can withstand the loss of Jason Kelce up front, which is a big loss. And I think they'll be good enough defensively. I just think the NFC is right for the taking. I think Philly could really rack up a lot of wins, get the number 1 seed, coast into the Super Bowl. And the Jets a little bit more of a flyer. I almost picked the Texans here, but just to be different, I'm going to take the Jets and say Aaron Rodgers is what that team needs. I mean, they were far and away the best defense in football, at least this side of the Ravens. I think they were number 2 in the NFL last year. And that could continue. And if you could just get anything competent from the quarterback, I think the Jets could make a run and be the team that ends Patrick Mahomes.
I thought you were going to say the Packers with the green.
I did too. That's why
They're not outlandish pick. I mean,
they're not.
A lot
They're
of
not.
young talent on that team.
And speaking of which, Matt, your pick.
My pick is Chiefs Packers.
Oh, nice. I
And
like that.
so, I have the Chiefs pulling off the three-peat. I just think what better way to show how special Patrick Mahomes is just to actually finally be able to do that. They've upgraded at receiver, which was kind of their weak point last year. They're still so young on defense. They have one of the youngest rosters in the league, I think I saw.
Yep.
They're just very young on defense. Steve Spagnuolo has them play their lights out. Like it's Patrick Mahomes. So I actually really like the Chiefs. The Packers, I don't know. It just felt like Jordan Love came on strong. I've seen, it just seems like he's going to be that next quarterback from Favre to Rodgers, now to Jordan Love to take that step. And he had a really impressive season last year. They upgraded the defense a little bit by finally getting rid of the coordinator who everyone hated over there. They brought in Josh Jacobs. I don't necessarily, I'm not as sold on my NFC pick, but I just chose the Packers just to do something a little different.
Super Bowl I rematch, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There's one kind of Super Bowl favorite that we haven't mentioned yet, and so we'll end with Jeff, and he'll give us that one.
Yeah. So I went with the Fighting Dan Campbell's, the Detroit Lions. I think they're going to win the Super Bowl. I really think they got a really good roster, and I think they got a lot of players. This is so important in the NFL. In their prime, like you have to be primed, right? Your roster, guys in their like mid to late 20s. NFL prime. They've been in the league long enough. They know how it works, but they're still physically dominant enough to do the things. Drew Brees used to always talk about that, the arc of your physical and mental abilities being, they're in the apex of that with guys like Aiden Hutchinson, and the offensive line's, I think, the best in the league. So I like them a lot, and I got them beating the Chiefs just because I think all the things Matt said is true. I mean, the Chiefs, it's hard to find a weak spot on that team, and they're so well coached. But, man, winning 3 in a row, it just feels like that's almost impossible. But I do think the Packers and the Falcons are 2 teams to watch in the NFC. I feel like the NFC could be ripe for one of those surprise teams to get in there this year.
Feels wide open. The Lions just they've been so smart and in such a just doing what makes sense sort of way. Their weak point last year was the secondary. Top 2 draft picks were cornerbacks. I mean, like they just go out and they do what makes sense to do, and they've gotten better and better and better. So I like that pick too.
And they know who they are. They definitely know their identity.
Pretty good storylines as we start to count down to Super Bowl 59 at the Superdome in February. It starts tomorrow night with Chiefs and Ravens. We'll be back Friday with a Saints-Panthers preview podcast, and we'll see you then. For our producer, Norm Bell, he's Rod Walker, Matthew Paras, Jeff Duncan, I'm Zach Ewing. This is Saints Insider. We'll see you next time.